Welcome to Beyond the Syllabus, where we talk with superintendents, curriculum leaders, and education innovators who are rethinking what school can be and how it can better serve the academic and personal needs of every learner. Hi, everyone. Today we have Dr. Rick Surrency on the podcast. Dr. Rick Surrency has 47 years in education, currently in his third term as superintendent of Putnam County School District, the 2023 Florida Superintendent of the Year. Led his district to become the first K-12 STEM accredited district in Florida, as well as spearheaded a massive increase in graduation rates over his tenure there. Dr. Rick Surrency, super excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks, Aiden. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Listen, with 6 children and 10 grandchildren, so I hear, you must have experienced many, many different learners in your time. Can you talk to me a little bit about what it was like raising 6 kids, how they learned differently, and kind of the adaptiveness you had to have as a parent?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because several of my kids have become teachers, even though I did not encourage them to do that. But I think at the time they probably like seeing me take summers off and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been really good, and I think just having kids in the schools gives me a special, like any educator, a special empathy for students and for parents because, we have our own.
Exactly. And it seems like that would have given you kind of a nice long timeline of different perspectives, right? You've been a teacher, you've been an administrator, you've been a superintendent, you've also been a parent, right? So it definitely gives you a good perspective there when leading a community.
Yeah, my oldest 2 grandkids, by the way, are graduating from high school next year. So it's just going full circle.
I love it. Well, congratulations to them. And so with those 6 kids, 10 grandchildren, how do you think about kind of the differences in how they learn, right? I mean, they're all different. They're all unique in their own individual self. How did you have to kind of treat each child differently in terms of helping them with their education?
Well, and I'm a big person on learning styles. And I think everybody has their own particular way of learning. And even my own kids, my son was my oldest son was a little tougher on trying to get him to stay engaged. He loved athletics, whereas my daughters and my youngest son, just really reveled in academics. So it really is a child by child situation. So I've learned a lot just by looking at them, and I transfer that over to students in schools and know that every child has their own unique way of learning.
100%. And I think that's such an important thing to acknowledge and something that we can definitely do a better job of addressing. But we'll dive back into the idea of personalized, individualized learning a little later on. But first, I want to start kind of at the beginning of your education career. You've dedicated 47 years to this profession. Mm-hmm. That's not a little bit of time, right? Take us back to the beginning. Why'd you get into this? Why are you passionate about it? Why are we here?
Well, that's a great question, Aiden. And actually, I started off as an instructional assistant in 1978, and I really did not intend on wanting to be a teacher or an educator. I really wanted to coach. I was football and baseball, basketball. I was passionate about that, and I knew in order to coach, I probably need to be in the field of education. So that's kind of what got me into it. And then once coaching ran its course, then I'm in there teaching, and then I've really developed a passion for teaching and improving education. And it's just been, an ascending ladder into leadership and that type of thing. And so, I think being in the classroom, I've been assistant principal, a principal, and now I'm an elected superintendent, by the way. And some of your audience may not be familiar with that, but that's really common in Florida. 40 of our 67 school districts are elected.
Wow.
Whereas around the United States, the most common way superintendents are hired are by school boards. So I have to run for election, raise money, go out and campaign, get votes every 4 years on the same cycle as the president of the United States.
That's fascinating.
It does create a different dynamic.
That's definitely a different dynamic. I want to learn a little bit more about that. Really quickly, though, it's interesting that you mentioned that you actually got into teaching because you wanted to be a coach. You didn't even want to be a teacher, right? But in some way, I mean, I grew up playing sports my whole life, baseball, basketball, etc. And the best coaches are the best teachers, right? And the best coaches have a really good way of knowing how they need to coach each specific student. What are their strengths and weaknesses, right? How does this tie in? How do I relate to them, right? Some kids do all right if you yell at them. Other kids will kind of crawl up into a hole if you yell at them, right? So there's all sorts of different athletes and all sorts of different students. So that's really interesting origin story there. But talk to me a little bit about this election process. So every 4 years, you got to go back out there, raise money. You
Yeah.
shed a little light on that?
Yeah. And by the way, just to echo what you just said, I agree with you. Some of the best teachers we have are also coaches just because they understand every kid is different. They have their own strengths and weaknesses, and you need to find that. And motivation and encouragement and engagement, all that is so common in athletics. But going back to the elected superintendent, and I speak at a lot of different conferences around the United States, and I get a lot of funny looks when I say that because most people are not familiar with that. But you literally have to go out and raise a campaign fund. I have to go out and make speeches. I have to go plant signs on the side of highways, campaign account, all that. And but the good thing about that is it helps me as an elected official stay close to the people I serve. Whereas an appointed superintendent, they only have to answer to their board members. And of course, the negative of that is they could be fired at any time from a school board. But I'm in office for 4 years unless I commit a crime or something and remove. But the reason I say that is I can put things in place at least for 4 years and build some sustainability. Whereas a lot of places where you have a turnover in superintendents every year, every couple of years, whatever, it's hard to get that continuity going. So I think that's really been the secret of our sauce here. And some of the systems that we have in place now, we put those in place 8 or 9 years ago and have really improved on those systems. So, and by the way, the school board cannot fire me. They do not hire me, but I still have to work alongside them because they still approve policy, budget, so on and so forth.
Yep. And that makes a lot of sense. If you have the idea that you might get fired after year one looming over you, that doesn't really give you the time and space to do what you feel like needs to be done in that district.
And
right?
usually superintendents, when they come in, they bring in their staff, they appoint their people. So when you have a turnover at the district level, it's very difficult to sustain things for a period of time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So talking about kind of your origin, your position here in education, can you think back in your experience as a student and think of some of the pain points you experienced, maybe times when you felt like the system just wasn't quite right for you? And how have you taken that pain point into something that you try to solve for the students in your district today?
I think that's a great question. And I always try to remember when I was in the classroom or as a student. And, especially I think of some of the classes I really struggled in and the reason why. And I think at that time, teachers were just, and I'm not criticizing teachers per se, but I'm saying engaging the student was not as important as it is now. Teachers were there. Hey, just let me teach my stuff. If they get it, fine. If they don't, it's their fault. And that's kind of the way I felt. And so I think now, the overall, trend is how can we find a way to really connect teaching with learning? And I heard somebody say years ago, this is kind of a funny analogy. A guy taught a dog, spent like a week teaching a dog how to whistle. And he had the best lesson, some of the best material, some of the best minds in how to teach a dog how to whistle. So that was his lesson. But at the end of all that, the dog still cannot whistle. So the point is, you can have the best teaching in the world, but if there's not learning, if learning does not take place, then it really means nothing. So that's the way I look at it is, how can we engage those students and find their passion where they want to learn? And every kid is different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's super important. I agree with you. I think engagement is becoming more important than it ever has been, right? Before it was pure numbers, it was pure performance, pure let's get this done. But I think what we're starting to realize as an education community is that well, things aren't getting done, and they're not getting done because they don't want to do them, right? So we need to engage them first on a personal level, make them feel like it's important and relevant to their life. And then we can talk about repetition and iteration and true learning outcomes.
Aiden, I had kind of a once in a lifetime experience 3 years ago. I had the opportunity to travel to the nation of Finland.
Wow.
And I toured their schools over there, and I've come back and I've spoken in a number of venues about that. But, Finland is one of the highest academic achieving nations in the entire world.
Yep.
And according to the PISA exam and so forth. So I was very curious. I went over there as part of an organization, and we went over there and we toured schools, but there's some really profound takeaways from that. And it really goes along with what you're talking about is how can they make learning more adapted to the student? And the number one thing that really stuck out to me, and when I went to the elementary schools to visit, they are real big on playtime. Students go outside and play for 30 minutes. Half hour. I'm sorry. They play for 15 minutes every hour. Okay.
Wow.
And it's just unstructured play. So they go outside and they bring them back in. But what it does, it really looks at the whole student, the student, not only the mental capacity, but also the physical capacity. And they do not have any standardized tests over there at all. And teachers are respected kind of like doctors, lawyers, engineers are over here. So there's a lot of fundamental differences, but it's working. And I'm not saying we're going to adopt that here, but it did open my eyes to how we engage students.
Yeah, it definitely makes you look internally at kind of the system that we operate in, right? I mean, I read a study that in the US, after third or fourth grade or something, a child, only 20% of students have more than 30 minutes of playtime in a school day, right? And there are just certain things that you cannot learn in a classroom that you will learn in unstructured play, right? When you're climbing a tree and you have to make the decision of whether to go up one more branch or to come back down, that's not a decision. That's not a thinking process that you can teach by sitting at a desk.
Right.
It is only something that can be learned by actually experiencing.
Well, it's also a lot of leadership going on. If you sit there and watch kids on the playground, you can observe some of the leaders emerge.
Yep.
Because they're out there and they're talking and the kids are tending to follow them and that type of thing. But the other thing too, I would stress that people need to sit down in a seat for hours on end and see how long you're going to be engaged.
Yep.
I have a hard time doing that too, just sitting in meetings. So you can just imagine little kids who are raring to go outside and play, how that, can impact them.
100%. And you mentioned that idea of leadership, watching kids on the playground. In that same study, it was talking about the skills developed between a group of friends trying to figure out what game to play. And one kid arguing and debating to play his game, and another arguing and debating to play their game. And then they're making up their own rules. All of these social interactions, these decision-making processes that are going on are so important, but again, cannot be taught by sitting at a desk.
Right.
So
and I really think that translates to high school. I mean, you mentioned yourself, you're in athletics and all that. And I think that is so important because that's how we engage students too. Extracurricular, co-curricular, all that stuff.
Yep.
If they see that, there's that learning, there's an end to it, and that maybe they can make friends and they can find interest and all by being involved in things outside the classroom. So I think some of the most successful people in schools are the busiest people in schools because they know how to structure their time.
For sure. I completely agree. So listen, I want to dive into all the amazing things that you've got going on at Putnam County currently and also over the course of the last decade, right? I mean, you've seen graduation rates grow from 54% all the way to 92% in 2021. Right. That is an amazing growth there. Tell us how that happened.
Well, and that's, has been kind of the reason I got elected. I mean, we had in this area in Florida, There was it's kind of a high poverty area, a lot of people on assistance and all that kind of stuff. So there's kind of a low expectation just because of that. So when I was elected, I was pretty much told by the community, hey, this is why we want you to lead the district. So we put together a plan, a very strategic plan, looking at a lot of early warning signs in our systems, looking at our data, cleaning up data. But more than anything else, Aiden, is we actually try to engage our students. We try to give them a reason for being in school. And a lot of the things that you see now, our STEM system, our K-12 STEM system, we've created a number of academies. We've created a lot of access points for our acceleration programs. We try to address as many different ways that students can be successful. And I think when students see that, hey, you know what, learning, there is an outcome. If I learn, there's something I can do with that. There's a reason for learning. So I think globally we created, number one, high expectations. We expect you to do this by a certain time. We expect you to be in school, but we also are giving you a reason to learn. If you learn, these are some things that, you might achieve later. And, another fundamental thing too, I want to point out, one of the first things we did is we would not let students or graduates or proposed graduates walk across the stage at graduation unless they had earned their diploma. I mean, we have some students that just in the past had a certificate of completion. They showed up, but they didn't have enough credits or didn't pass the test or whatever. They were still allowed to walk, but we made graduation mean something. And if you did not earn it, you were not celebrated. So again, that was just a fundamental expectation. And we kind of created a common language across our district. Our high school administrators became graduation coaches themselves, where they really knew what was expected and how to measure the data. If someone left the school to transfer to another school outside the district, we made sure we followed that and knew that they had entered another school, because if you don't, they will count against your graduation rate. So there's a lot of data points that we had to measure. But I think we really surprised ourselves. One of the questions you sent me is, when did I realize that things were starting to turn around? And we set some goals for this graduation rate, but it actually exceeded our goals. And it showed us, you know what, I think people are starting to see the culture is changing here. The expectations are changing. And it really turned out a lot better than we thought, because we were really trying to hit the 80% graduation mark, to be honest with you.
Yep.
And we exceeded 90%.
Smash that out of the park.
Highest gain of any district in the state of Florida during that period of time.
That's amazing. That's truly an amazing accomplishment. And there's a gem in part of your response there, which is acknowledging the many different successes of a student, right? I think one of the biggest problems in education right now that is becoming very agreeable is that it's such a one size fits all model, and that's just not working, right? The way school is set up right now, it implies that there's one portrait of a graduate, dare I say, right? What does that mean? There are so many ways a student can be successful, and acknowledging a student for being successful in their own way, I think, is super important.
Yeah, and it's really customizing. And I want to use customizing more than personalizing, because I looked at, some of the questions you sent me about personalization. And I think 100% personalization is you just let students kind of go from A to Z and however they get there. But we try to customize it. First of all, in Florida, and I'm sure many other states, we have a very, very strict accountability system. We have to teach the standards, and now the way we teach them can be debated, but we are required to teach the standards because that's how our students are assessed. So we have to kind of follow a progression, if you will, without just saying, hey, y'all go learn it or get there at the end on your own. But we do customize it where we try to meet their specific personal needs. We try to group them with other students that complement them. We try to look at their different learning styles. I mean, there's so many ways we customize it. I think that's also been a key for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. You mentioned that kind of that moment you started to see that shift or realize that you were actually moving in the right direction. You mentioned a shift in culture, right? A shift in culture from the students stems obviously from teachers, which stems from admin, which stems from district leadership. Talk to me about over the course of the last 10 years and your 47 years in education, how have you gone about creating a culture as in being a leader?
Well, and I think I can sum it up in one word is listening. I think, and I'm a big one for, and at least I guess I learned this through marriage counseling and all that, but I've learned how to listen more than speak. And I've really set up some systems in place. I have a student advisory council that I meet with from time to time. I meet with teachers, I meet with administrators, I meet with the community. And I think that has created a culture of, you know what, they care about us. He cares about us. My teacher cares about us because we listen. The way we learn about people is we listen to them first. We listen to understand instead of listening to respond. So I've tried to create that culture from the top down and really demonstrate we are interested in what our students are doing. What are their concerns? What are some challenges they're dealing with at home? How can we best meet their needs? That's also same way we deal with other groups, with the teachers, with our community. I mean, I go to a lot of community events, especially being elected. I have to really be out in the community and I listen to them. And you know what? Some of the best things that we've done here is just by virtue of listening. I had one of our biggest employers come to me when I first got elected. And they said, listen, we need for you to create some way that you can develop employees come work for us. It was a paper mill. And they need to have these skills, these highly technical skills. So with that, just by virtue of listening, that was kind of like the beginning of our STEM program because we started this advanced manufacturing program. And then again, because we were trying to meet the needs of our community. But I think a lot of people make mistakes is they just assume people need something or they want something and they just go out and do it. And it really doesn't line up with what the true needs are. So I think no matter who we are in any kind of leadership capacity, we've got to listen and people know you can show them that they are valued by virtue of just listening to them. So I think that's been a real key in developing our culture. And I actually had talked to our principals about that a lot to really take time, do some things with your faculty, build that family culture, but more than anything else, listen to what's going on and you can help them be successful.
Yeah, and I think that's beautifully simple, right? I mean, it's why we've got 2 ears and one mouth, so they say, right?
Yeah.
But no, seriously, listening is so important. The best leaders are the best listeners.
That's right.
Right? You got to listen to the needs of your team, listen to the needs of your people, and then you know how to move.
When you're the smartest person in the room, it's time to change rooms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Well, listen, man, in a district with 10,000 plus students, 13 schools and over 1,000 staff members. How do you instill that culture of listening and everything else, not only kind of at the top level, but all the way down?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with being visible too, and not just sitting in the office and expecting everything to happen. You know, going out, being present, being seen. When you're around people, when they see you in their schools, when you walk in their classrooms, that shows them that you value what they're doing. When I go to community events, when I go to school, after school events, go to athletic games and all that, when people see me, I'm trying to communicate my presence is I value what they're doing by virtue of being there. And I encourage our other leaders to do the same thing. So I think just being present, being seen, and that's easier to do in a small district like ours. In a large district, you know, it's a little more difficult, but I think just being out there and being amongst people really creates that culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an amazing mindset for sure. Listen, tell us about your STEM program. First K-12 STEM accredited district in Florida. How did you guys end up being the pioneers of that? And how has that kind of had a trickle effect on the rest of the state?
Well, I've actually spoke to a number of groups about this, and because that is very that's something people are very interested in now. But again, being a small district, it's very difficult to go out and buy a bunch of robotics and all this different, drones and all that, because we are challenged financially. But you know what? The number one thing we've done is we partnered with organizations that have helped us to do that. And case in point, we are working closely with a nonprofit out of the Jacksonville area. It's called the STEM 2 Hub, STEM number 2 Hub. And the two M's stand for math and medical. But they are a major nonprofit group that tries to support STEM in schools. And we work very closely with them. They provide a lot of training. They provide access to a lot of products, equipment, that type thing. So again, by doing that, we have really, I wanted to really start in high school. Okay. But my staff, who's a lot smarter than I am, said, listen, in order for this to be successful, you have to build sustainability. We really need to start it in the elementary schools. So we really started a K-12 STEM plan where in kindergarten through fifth, students are exposed to STEM at least once a week. In sixth grade, and by the way, we have a kindergarten through sixth configuration. In sixth grade, every single student has a STEM class every single day.
Wow.
Daily STEM class. And we made a commitment as a district to hire STEM teachers to do that. Now, when they get into junior, senior high school, then that's when their interest is kind of peaked because they've really been inundated with it as a sixth grader. They can look at those STEM pathways, those career pathways.
Well,
And so again, it's kind of a model where we're exposing them to it, and then we're trying to lead them into that pathway. When we first started, I saw another district use a STEM bus. They actually converted an old school bus, turned it into like a lab. I said, that's kind of cool. So we came back. We didn't do a bus. We did a van, and we call it the STEM van. And we actually put a teacher on that van, and they rode around to different schools and they taught STEM, like one school per day, that kind of thing. So that's how we started. And now we've been able to expand that. But,
that's so cool.
Yeah. But in high school now, we've really expanded it. So many things are going on. We're doing engineering. We're doing robotics. We have robotics teams. We're doing drones, coding and all that. The one thing that I'm most proud of is we started an aeronautics program.
Wow.
Where we teach ground flight stuff on flight simulators. And in the last couple of years, we've been able to get funding where now we are putting kids in real airplanes. And
no way.
They get flight training hours. And, that's not cheap, but we've been able to get some funding to do that. And I'm really proud to say we've had 4 students who have actually solo flight.
Wow.
Flew planes by themselves. And we're trying to give these kids an opportunity to get their private pilot's license, because in the Jacksonville area, there's a large need for pilots, and especially commercial pilots. So that's just another way we're trying to meet those needs of our local community. And we're training kids for jobs that don't even exist yet. And here's another exciting thing too. In Florida, they just created an organization called Space Florida, where this organization, which is funded by the state, works with school districts to create those pathways where the space industry from outside of Florida will move into Florida and make things like satellites and rocket parts and all that kind of stuff. And for example, welding, we have welding, but welding a satellite is different than welding heavy metal, that kind of thing. So a lot of those skills will transfer over. but we're trying to create that opportunity for kids to have those 21st century jobs. And, space industry in Florida has just taken off with SpaceX and Blue Origins and all that. So the opportunity is endless, and we're one of the first school districts to be a part of that.
That's amazing. That's good for you guys. In a world that's so fast moving and innovative, that's amazing that a smaller sized district is able to be on top of it like that.
But we can't do it alone. We can't do it in a vacuum. We have to really partner with other people who are going to help us.
Yep. Strength in numbers.
Yep.
Strength in numbers. Listen, that STEM stuff is really incredible. And you mentioned kind of the financial times and stuff like that. Talk to me about how the budget environment at the federal level, at the state level, how's that affecting you guys? And how is that changing the way that you have to kind of prioritize different things in the district?
Well, I think that's a handful to talk about. And, the federal level, you can see all the stuff's happening with the Department of Education. I really don't think that's going to impact us as much. We still are getting that title money that we use to address a lot of our low performing students and that type of thing. At the state level now, especially in Florida, and we see other states going to this, it's become a highly competitive environment. And I'm sure you've heard of like the family empowerment scholarships and that type of thing where, students, the money follows the student. And if a parent wants a student to be, to go to a private school, then they can go to a private school and that best meets their needs. And the money that they would receive coming to our school will leave us and follow the students of that school. So that's becoming very prevalent in Florida. And like it or not, that's the world we live in Florida. So again, going back to STEM and all these neat little programs we're doing is we're trying to be competitive. We're trying to give kids opportunities with us that they cannot find anywhere else. We in public education, we just cannot assume kids are going to come to our school because they live near the school. Yep. So we have a lot of students take virtual education, and that really has grown since the pandemic. A lot of homeschool kids, all that kind of stuff. And I welcome choice. I want kids to be able to find the best education possible, and we want them to choose us. But we just cannot assume they're going to choose us unless we're out there doing things that are going to meet their needs.
Rolling with the idea of being competitive, right? You have to make yourself a competitive offering to these students and these families. How are you guys adopting AI? How are you guys adopting innovative technology and tools and stuff like that?
Yeah, we're really, especially with the president's executive order about AI, we're really trying to, jump on board and all that. And we actually this current month, we had what we call a Navigate conference for 75 teachers who came in and really were taught some of the latest AI. Actually, about 5 years ago, we started our first AI class.
Wow.
And of course, we didn't really have a teacher certified in AI. But you know what? Again, by partnering, we partnered with Columbia University, and they had a professor who actually agreed to teach AI for us virtually. We had a AI class, and the teacher was there, and the teacher was learning too. And he's actually teaching AI now, but he learned from that college professor who really at that time had the latest AI. And we actually learned a lot about facial recognition technology and that type of thing. And again, this is around the time of the pandemic. So, everybody's wearing a mask and all that, but that was our first venture into that. And I think we're all finding out that AI, if we don't embrace it and help it be a part of our culture and the way kids learn, I equate it to back in the 1970s when I was in school, they came out with something called a Texas Instrument Calculator. And I can never forget that people thought that was the devil. You can't let kids have calculators. They'll cheat, that kind of thing. And I think we all have one now, So it's become a common thing. And that's the way I look at AI now. I mean, I've seen school districts actually ban AI totally.
Yeah.
And I do think we need to be responsible. We need to have policies in place, especially when it comes to student data. We need to be very careful about that, especially some of that open AI. But I think AI can be a tool that teachers and students can use to really help learning. It's it's not going to replace learning, could help learning. And we also cannot trust, just flat information we get. We really need to look at the sources of where it's coming from. We need to cite it when we use it and research and all that. So yeah, we're kind of knee deep in it right now, and we're starting to swim in it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly important to embrace it. And, for those districts who have placed a complete ban, I can understand the emotion behind that, but I think you have to look at it from the perspective of if it's not now, it's later, right? It's not like if it's not now, it's never. So you're just going to put yourself behind. And again, like you said, you got to do it responsibly, put policy in place, but you have to allow for innovation. You have to allow for change,
Well,
right? And
and
start.
going back to the competitiveness, if you're not looking at the current trends, the current technology, the current tools, you're not being competitive. You're not really offering students the things that they really need. And I
Yep.
think we're doing students a disservice when we don't expose them to AI and all the tools that are out there. But again, doing it responsibly, having some rules in place, and so we're learning as we go. But it is definitely on our forecast.
100%. 100%. Well, listen, as kind of a concluding thought here, I want you to dig into your creative mind. And in 100 years, when you and I are both long gone, in your wildest dreams, what does education look like?
That's funny because I've done several presentations on the future of education, and I actually played a little clip from Wiley, or is it Wiley, or it's a cartoon thing where human beings are just like, they're fat and they're transported around and they really don't do anything because machines do it all, and they just kind of feed people the information and all that. And that's kind of a comical way of looking at it. But I still think 100 years from now, education is still going to be a human endeavor.
Yeah.
And everything we're learning now, all the tools that we have are just going to accentuate that. But bottom line, it's about human beings interacting with other human beings. That's how we learn. And I think some people kind of get carried away and say, it's just going to be all robots, and we won't have to do anything, and artificial intelligence would take over and all that. But I highly disagree. That I think I'm in this business because I like people, I love people, and this is a human business that we
Mhm.
need to continue getting better at.
Yep.
And you said it several times, Aiden. It's about engaging, trying to customize learning, trying to find what makes human beings tick. And maybe there's some tools that will aid us in that, but I don't think we can replace that. But I think I still think 100 years from now, we're still going to have some sort of schools where people come together instead of just sitting home on a computer. You know what we learned so much for not to do in the pandemic? I think we learned that we can access education remotely.
Yep.
We still have to have that human contact where a teacher is in front of a student. So that has been a major learning for me. 100 years from now, I don't think that's going to change.
Yep. I tend to agree with you there. I think that teacher-student relationship, that human-centric interaction is what ultimately fuels everything. And all the tools and technology on the side, like you said, is just meant to empower that interaction and those experiences.
Let me
So I
share one
definitely
thing with you that happened yesterday. It was a
Yeah.
very timely. I met with all of our principals and assistant principals yesterday, and we did something we've never done before with them. We actually had a panel of graduates from our school district. There were 4 former students who were somewhat successful in their field, and they were probably in their 20s, not long out of school. But we actually had them sit at a panel and field questions and all that. It was really neat to see the way those former students viewed what our school system did for them.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when they're graduating, I don't think they really realize that. But once they get out in the world, they get a career, now they can get some perspective and say, you know what the school did or a particular teacher did. I mean, we ask them questions like, who's your favorite teacher? What are some things you've changed? What was kind of cool is some of their favorite teachers were actually sitting in the audience.
That's pretty cool.
Who, before they became administrators, were teachers. And it was really interesting. And I think that was such an impactful thing. If we can talk to those former students, no matter what district we're in, I think they're going to give us some really good information that will help us with our current students.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you ask people to look back on their education experience, they always point to the relationships.
That's it.
Right.
Absolutely.
So listen, for a young superintendent or young administrator who hopes to be in your seat one day, what's the best advice you could give them?
Listen, like I've always said, but you know what? Embrace those people around you. Find some people who you can put your trail hitch on, so to speak, and learn from them. And I've got some people now that I talk about that I've partnered with, I've learned from, or learned what not to do. But if you really want to be in a leadership position, really kind of look at what other people are doing, ask a lot of questions, and you'll get your opportunity. And
Awesome.
I'm still learning now. At 47 plus years in, I'm still learning now. And I love what I do. I don't know if I ever retire. So
I love it. I love it, man. Well, Dr. Surrency, thank you so much for an amazing conversation. Thanks so much for shedding some light onto what's going on in Putnam County. Sounds like an energetic and fun district to be a part of. So I appreciate your time for the conversation.
yeah. Aiden, where are you located right now?
I'm in New York City.
New York City. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd love to visit there, but I would not want to live there.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. That's for sure.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's an honor to be here.
Of course. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Got an idea, a story, or a question about what we discussed today? We'd love to hear from you. To learn more about Unique Learn, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and visit uniquelearn.co.